time. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. So we'd like to thank San Jose State for their thoughtful consideration of our case. We think that we have the means and the responses that are adequate to respond to your concerns. We have several responses to the objections. I'm gonna start off. First, we heard that you mentioned the qualification that the payment for bone marrow would be allowed only if there is no direct contact between the persons exchanging bone marrow. And you mentioned that, and I was looking forward to hearing what exactly you meant by that. I didn't hear exactly how that would play out. I just myself thought of possibly relatives who do have direct contact with each other, and someone needs bone marrow from their aunt or something like that, and I don't know. So it just seems difficult that the no direct contact thing wasn't clear. Also, we thought it was a straw man when you said that. We said that the reasons for donating bone marrow are always undisclosed, and then you mentioned a couple of reasons that people do mention, such as time constraints, they're too busy, things like that, or they're scared of the process. We think that's a straw man. We said that often the reasons for for not showing up to donate bone marrow are undisclosed. So that's what I've got. I'm going to pass it over to Austin.
Yes, and also in some of the nuanced aspects of your case, you said that the liver replenishes itself, but in fact, when you take the liver out entirely, it does not replenish itself. And also, when you stipulate that bone marrow is not categorized as an organ, actually in the federal piece of legislation of the Affordable Care Act, bone marrow is listed as an organ and categorized as an organ. And it's also listed, bone marrow is also listed in the National Organ Transplant Act of 1984 as the precedent before the federal legislation that bone marrow is in fact an organ. And also, I had some difficulties in trying to interpret and understand what moral principles you were invoking, and when you mentioned the conditions in which it would be ethically justifiable to accept payment for bone marrow or to pay for bone marrow. You mentioned the conditions of apheresis, and only if the persons were not in contact with one another directly or personally in the donation of bone marrow. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Max to answer some of your concerns as well.
Yeah, I just want to clear something up as far as your objection to or your comment on our methodology. I don't know if you heard me clearly, but in the methodology, I just want to reiterate, we're not adopting a Rawlsian view at all. We only appeal to him as an example, the philosophy students and the philosophy PhDs on the panel, just to understand what the public reason liberalism really is.
And then, yeah, you guys, you mentioned that bone marrow was a misnomer, and then you want to talk about the apheresis process. We're a little confused about that, just because the question is about bone marrow. So I was a little confused about that clarification. I don't know. I thought we were talking about bone marrow. So I wasn't sure how you kind of tease that out. And then also, I'd like to address your question about how minorities are affected, are adversely affected in greater proportion than non-minorities, given the bone marrow situation. And I just want to say that we did briefly mention in our conclusion how maybe underprivileged members of society are more greatly affected, but given the time constraints that we had, we weren't able to fill that in the 10 minutes. Of course, we're open to talking about that more with you guys afterwards or whatever.
And we recognize that 1 in 540 people, it's a 1 in 540 chance for white people to find a bone marrow donor, whereas for ethnic minorities, it's a 1 in 10 million chance of finding a bone marrow donor that matches them. So we do understand that nuanced aspect of the case. And it's just within the time constraints, we weren't able to put that into our case and to address it in full. But we just wanted to go ahead and let you know that we're aware of that and we're cognizant of it. But again, just to reiterate, we believe that you failed to assess the central moral dimension of the case, and that you seem to address something differently from bone marrow. And so you made this really detailed deviation from what bone marrow was. I don't think, the question is asking on what conditions, if any, would payment for bone marrow be ethically justifiable, and you answered something different from that. With that being said, if you would like to conclude our reply.
At this point, the judge
judges have 1 minute to confer.